Welcome to Side by Side, a podcast where I, Robert Kwong, take you inside conversations with artists, creatives, healers, and warriors taking the charge in their transformational story. Today's conversation was held as part of the Multidisciplinary writing workshop led by me and Ashley Griggs. We invited special guests into the space where workshop participants got to ask questions about the industry and the craft of writing. One of those special guests is playwright, screenwriter, television writer, and actor Chloé Hung. Born and raised in Toronto, Canada, Chloé has been called a writer to watch by the Globe and Mail. A graduate of NYU's MFA Dramatic Writing program, her theater work has been seen on stages like the Kennedy Center, the Banff Playwrights Centre, the Geffen Theatre, and the New Jersey Repertory Company. In film and TV, Chloé has written for Queen Sugar and Cherish Today on OWN, and the Watchful Eye on Freeform. She's a Film Independent Screenwriters Lab Fellow, and her screenplays have been shortlisted by the Blacklist and the Fusion Film Festival. In this conversation, Chloé shares some of her early memories that sparked her imagination, the journey of balancing personal with paid writing, and the skills that writers should cultivate in addition to writing itself. Ashley and I will be co-facilitating the Multidisciplinary writing workshop once again later this year. If you'd like to learn more about both of our work and the workshop, please visit www.robertkwonghome.com. Thank you for your time today, Chloé. Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you for that intro.
So we're going to just go through a couple questions and then open it up to all of you to ask Chloé questions yourself. Feel free to drop any questions that you might have or that come to mind in the chat as we go, and then we can loop back to them, or just hold your questions until like the second half and we'll follow up with that. To get started, Chloé, can you tell us a little bit about how you started writing and your journey towards your current relationship to writing?
Okay, wow. I feel like whenever I'm asked like how I began writing, I always go back to this story from when I was a kid. I was 10 years old and my family, we were on a trip in Barcelona, which is already a very magical, inspiring place. And my mom is an architect, so she was like telling me about all the Gaudi architecture and like the history and all of that. So I learned the word anarchist for the first time, and for some reason, my 10-year-old brain, that was like the literary spark. And I started writing this novel, as much as you can at that age, about 4 Canadian teenagers who go to Barcelona and discover this underground cult of anarchists, and they have to solve a murder mystery. And I would like write like a chapter every day and then read it to my parents at night. And like one day, for whatever reason, I didn't write anything, and my parents were like, wait, but what happens next? And like that kind of like blew my mind. And I feel like that set me on this path where I was like, oh, something that I created in my brain, in my imagination, I have the power to shape what the story is, and other people are interested. They're interested in what I have to say in the story. And that kind of was the high I've been chasing ever since. High school, I was getting into like drama. I had some really amazing teachers that have really like pushed me in that direction. I don't know if I would be doing this without them. And then in university, I tried everything I could to not be a writer, because I was like, why? What is the path there? It was so unclear for me. And then after university, I was like, no, I want to be a writer. I just don't know how. So that's why I applied to grad school and did the MFA in dramatic writing. And after that, I went to LA, and that's sort of like where things kind of like went from there.
And so one central piece to this workshop is that we're exploring different types of writing and kind of discussing how you can go about living a creative life, exploring different types of writing, not just being conditioned to stick within a lane. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the different mediums that you work in, whether that's professionally or passion projects on the side, all the different types of writing and creative work that you work in.
Yeah, so well, Robert already mentioned playwriting, screenwriting, TV writing, and that's why that particular program at NYU was perfect for me because that's what they taught. That's what I wanted to do. But and that program is 2 years, and between the first and second year, I went back to Canada, back to Toronto. I wrote and directed a play and put it up at the Toronto Fringe Festival because at NYU, as great as that program is, they didn't really have a good like practical component where you could, stage your work and like experience what that is like, because I think that's a very important part of the creative process that sometimes writers and writing programs don't always emphasize. We sort of focus so much on the like literal writing part that we don't know how to do the rest of it. And I think the rest of it is pretty important to learning how to be a writer and creating stories that people are then going to experience. So I wanted that experience. I wanted to know what it was like. I wanted to be able to put on my own work. So I went back to Canada. I did that between my first and second year. That turned out to be sort of like the best thing that I did. It really helped me along with my career. It helped me get representation, and then it helped me get a visa for the States because I'm Canadian and I need a visa to be in the States. And so then, as I said, after graduating, I moved out to LA. I was very lucky that about like a year and a half into doing the assistant gig, I was staffed on Queen Sugar, which is my first TV show that I was staffed on, and that was like an amazing experience. I came in season 3, so they were sort of already kind of a well-oiled machine, and again got to learn so much more about the writing process because, like, again, in school we're taught in TV to just write a pilot. That's what you're taught, but you're not taught how to create a whole season of TV. And so being like thrown into the writer's room, I learned so much. There was one senior writer, he was our co-EP, and I learned so much from him that is just like stuff that you would learn from experience. And he had the experience. He had been on so many shows. So I would like pitch what I thought was an idea. But really it was just like a scene. That's what I was pitching. I didn't realize that. And so I would pitch it, and then he would just start musing and kind of like, what about this? What about this? And suddenly he was crafting this arc that spanned multiple episodes. And I was like, wow, I did not know how to do that. I was not taught how to do that. So I feel like that being in the writer's room, there's sort of nothing like it. You're not really prepared to go into it. I've written screenplays. I've adapted a book. Feature film, as you guys know, is like so difficult. And the role of a writer oftentimes in features is you're sort of like a gun for hire a lot of the times. And so that was sort of like a different experience going from TV, where the writers have so much more creative control, and then being hired on a project where there's already a director, there's a book that they want to adapt, there are producers that are, they're in charge of getting all the money and everything. And so all you have to do is just like spit out what the director wants. And that was a completely different experience for me to be like, oh, okay, so yes, I am bringing my voice, and yes, I am bringing, whatever skills I have to this project, but ultimately I'm not serving my vision. I'm serving the director and the producer's vision. Ultimately, that was a very interesting experience. And then I've also written and directed some of my own short films where I was the director. So then I could sort of get a bit of that creative power back. And so my latest short film is called Gem and Shaz. It's not available in the States. Unfortunately, it's only available in Canada on our streaming site called Crave. And I shot that 2021, and it's about these two. It's a coming of age story, very much based on my best friend and me, and how we couldn't really go to school dances as teenagers because our parents were so strict, and we kept having to find little workarounds to actually get there. So that's what the film is about, these two girls who try to go to the school dance, but they end up only being allowed to go for 1 hour at the very, very beginning when no one else is there except for two teachers, played by myself and my friend. So that was like an amazing experience to direct that, and to also have like my friend who I've known since I was 4 years old, and who she's the inspiration for it, and she was in it too.
Yeah, I love that answer too, because I think you're touching on that, it is really important to develop community along the way. I'd say probably whether you're working professionally in writing or even just have it as a creative practice for personal reasons, you can learn so much from different people that you encounter, different people in different roles, and then also taking on different roles yourself. And I will say, Chloe and I met working in theater, and she's also tried on the role of actor really successfully. And so I think that's an incredible piece to you, is that you're willing to jump into all sorts of different roles and creative projects. So I wouldn't leave that out of your description, the work that you do. I'm curious if any of the work that you do in, let's say, TV, film, theater, if you feel like what you've learned in one medium might have influenced or impacted what you take to a different medium.
Yeah, I would say just because I had done more theater before I had entered the world of TV and film, and in theater, there's a big emphasis on the workshopping process and the rehearsal process. So there's just so much time that you have with the material, with the actors, with a director and a dramaturg, hopefully, to really like get into the nitty gritty of the play, and the workshopping process is my favorite process, because you can write whatever you want by yourself in your room, but then when you put it in the mouths of actors and the bodies of actors, like things can really change, and you could be like, wow, I thought that was like a really cool thing I wrote, but that's so awkward coming out of someone else's mouth. And so I really enjoy that process of like getting that feedback, going back, writing some more, bringing in new pages, having people try things out. And I think I wasn't expecting to feel that similarity in the writer's room, because I just thought, that's just part of the like bubble of writing. But because you're with so many other people in the writer's room, there is sort of that like workshop spirit, where you guys really are like throwing ideas around. The best idea goes, hopefully, usually. How do you feel, like rejection in the writer's room or just in general?
In general, just like writer's room. I see you've won like a lot, or been like finalist for a lot of stuff, and I'm just like, what is that like?
Well, I have a folder on my computer that is all of the rejections I've received from Sundance for all of the writers' labs, like episodic theater, film, and I'm still gonna apply again this year. Like it's one of those things where like rejection unfortunately just comes with the job, and you kind of just have to like feel your feelings and then just be like, what's next, and just kind of have to not take it super personally, because like so many people are trying to do what we're doing, and oftentimes it isn't personal. It's not that your work wasn't good enough. It's just it didn't hit the right note at the right time. It didn't resonate with the right person at the right time. And another year, you might have different readers coming in to read. So like people could read the exact same project and react completely differently. The industry also changes so much. Like a few years ago, when I had sold this TV pilot of mine, it was an original idea, very diverse cast, very, culturally specific and all that. And now it's like, oh, we only want IP. We want things that appeal to a broad white audience. So like, there's also like that aspect of it where you of course you take it personally in the moment, but once you're done feeling your feelings, you just have to be like, okay, I just got to move on and figure out what my next thing is. And that's sort of connecting back to Ashley's question. Like, that's why I feel very fortunate that I sort of am interested in so many different aspects of the creative process and the arts. So you know, I can be like, okay, I got rejected for this theater thing. Let me shift over to working on this feature screenplay that I've been wanting to get off the ground for a while. And so, you know, Glengarry, Glen Ross, always be closing. ABC. For writers, it's like always be writing, like always be generating your own shit. And like, hopefully it's like, it's almost like a numbers game. Hopefully like one day, one of those projects is going to like hit with the right person at the right time.
How do you like maintain your enthusiasm and general creative inspirational spirit through this process? And also, how do you not let, you know, the submission process, which I don't find to be like a creative process, right? It's like the thing that comes alongside the creative reward. But how do you kind of not let that affect your writing, if that makes sense?
I don't know.
We're asking good
I feel
questions
like,
then.
no, but like, but this is something that I struggle with so much because I feel like sometimes it feels like 60% of my job is just applying to shit and like writing these personal statements, and every fellowship lab whatever has like a slightly different question that you have to answer, and they're always really inane and stupid. You know, 1,000-word personal statements, 750-word synopsis, you also have an outline, and then this and and all that stuff. I don't really know the answer, but I guess like it's more just like motivation. But in terms of staying motivated, I don't know. I just have like, I mean, there was one earlier this year where I was like, is this one really worth it? I've written so many. Let me just skip this one this year. And yeah, it's not creative. It's like a whole other skill that you have to learn how to do. And some people are really good at writing personal statements. I don't think that I am at all. But it's a whole other skill that I'm like, maybe someone should teach a workshop of how to apply to stuff, because that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure we ask Coda's question. So, how do you
How do I
juggle?
juggle my calendar? That's how I juggle it. Like my calendar app is my best friend, and then also the reminders app as well. So it's just like multiple alarms. So if it's like applying for fellowships and labs and residencies and stuff like that, like I set it so that it's like, remind me 2 weeks out, remind me 2 days out, remind me on the day. Usually I don't do it 2 weeks in advance. I'll do it like a day before. But just having that on my calendar, just like for me, that's what helps, is just to like be organized in that way. But in terms of like juggling it, like yeah, you sort of have to parse out like what is worth working on today. I have this screenplay that is due to my manager versus this like playwriting fellowship. Which one should I work on today? And like, how can I balance my time properly? And I think that is like specific to like each person. I will say that a skill that I've learned that I have is that I can write very fast. Other people write, you know, these like beautiful personal statements that just like need more time. In that instance, I feel like setting your alarm for like a week out if you really do need a week to do it. Professional work versus personal work. Oh, that one's hard, because sometimes you do have to focus on the professional stuff or the more commercial stuff, and sometimes you really do have to just leave your passion projects for when you have time. But then on the flip side, you're like, oh, what if my passion project is the thing that's going to get more work? And unfortunately, sometimes what it comes down to is like, which one's going to pay you sooner? And like, that's sort of like the reality of it, is like, okay, this book adaptation screenplay, I don't love this book, but it is what I'm contracted to do right now. And it is going to be the thing that pays me sooner than this like TV idea, which I haven't even told anybody yet.
Do you have any hobbies that you feel keep you creative or keep you thinking about, whether it's thinking about new ideas for projects or just like staying creative, nourished human?
For me, it's playing the piano. So that's just something that I like to do when I'm procrastinating, I watch a lot of TV and I doom scroll as much as the next person. But sometimes when I'm like hitting a rut, like hitting like writer's block, I'm hitting a wall, and I'm like, should I doom scroll on TikTok, or should I go to my piano and just like look up some chords and like sing a little song and whatever. And I find that like doing something like that, it makes me feel like still kind of like in a creative headspace without the sort of slump that sometimes, if you're watching TV or if you're like doom scrolling. I mean, look, did I like taking piano for 15 years as a child? No. Am I grateful that I did that now? Yeah. Am I going to admit that to my father? No. But I find that like having like another sort of like creative outlet has actually like been really useful for me and helping me, because it sort of like takes you out of your like writing project. You're like, oh, I'm stuck on this story. And it sort of like takes you out of it, but still keeps you kind of creative. Like, I feel like the other thing is like going to a museum, but sometimes you're not like gonna like pick up and go to a museum on a whim. I mean, maybe you are, but it's almost like experiencing like a different kind of art sort of like helps you with yours.
Yeah, and I know that you've built music into some of your work. From what I'm remembering of one of your plays, you sort of
Oh, yes, I have.
Yeah, I remember loving like
Actually,
learning more about that, like more about your interest in music through your work too.
yes, I always end up writing like a little ditty or like a little song in my plays. And the most recent play that I've written has sort of been the most like full, like I've written multiple songs. It's not a musical, but I think like I'm starting to explore that a little more. It's absolutely terrifying. So a few months ago, I had a reading of this play where there was no time to teach the actors the songs because they were coming in just for the day. So our program director was like, do you want to like record the songs yourself? And then you'll just like play it on the laptop whenever we like get to that part. And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And so I just like recorded like very like just like a microphone on the piano, like nothing professional at all. And then when we were doing the reading, every time I hit play, I was like, this is the worst thing in the world. Like, I hate this so much. This is the most embarrassing thing I have ever done in my life, to like sit here and like suddenly the play stops and everyone is just listening to me singing on a very terrible recording. Anyways, that's a digression. I was not able to enjoy the reading until I like kind of like came to terms with it. And then we did another reading in January, where I was like, okay, I learned from that first experience. And this is just something very different, and I'm exposing a different part of myself. I've done the workshop process so many times as a playwright that I'm now sort of used to receiving feedback in that way, and I'm used to like presenting my work. But in presenting my songs this time, it sort of like reminded me of like how vulnerable and intimate writing can be. And so when you're sort of expressing yourself in a slightly different medium, you kind of have to like go through the like nerves and all of that. There was a question in the chat. Is there anything you learned from acting to change the way you write? Yeah, totally. Because I find that there are certain writers who have never acted before. Like some writers have never acted before and they're great at writing for actors. But there are some writers who have never written for actors who have to like move around in a space and interact with each other. And I find that just having, I guess, experience that sometimes, not always, but sometimes I find that when I'm writing, I am sort of like picturing what it would be like to say those words out loud. Part of what helps is like if you can actually just like read it to yourself, if you can sort of like stand up in your room instead of just like at your computer, like reading with your eyes, but like if you can stand up and like actually read it out loud, sometimes I find that helps to be like, ooh, that sentence was really awkward. That's so many words to say something that was much more simple. Sorry, Ashley, do you want to
Well, I was just going to say, want everyone to feel comfortable just unmuting themselves too and asking Chloe the questions directly if you want, if you feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, sure. I was just curious to hear how you approach feedback, the forum, sharing any preferred methods.
Yeah, something, I don't know if the NYU people feel this way, but I think that one thing that our program did well was teach us how to give and receive feedback. And I find that sometimes when I encounter people who have sort of not had that experience, they have no idea how to give and receive feedback. And so I am very grateful to like my cohort at NYU. There were a few of us who moved out to LA at the same time, and we formed a writers group, and it's been going strong. I think we're going on 7, 8 years now of meeting. Oh yeah, I know. I'm very proud of it, guys. It's really all due to one person who is super, super organized. That's like literally the only reason we've been able to do that for so long. So if you have a writer's group, you need someone who's really organized and really on top of it. Otherwise it will fall apart. So I have found that when it comes to getting feedback, there's sort of like a few things, right? There are the people you trust the most. And then there are the people who you have to receive feedback from. So like producers, a director, if you're in a writer's room, your showrunner, those are the people who you have to get feedback from. And not all of them know how to do that. I find that like giving feedback, something that NYU taught us like well and trained us really well was how to give feedback for that person instead of what you would do if you were writing that story, which I think a lot of people sort of forget especially when it's like a writer giving a writer feedback, is like you kind of have to like remember who you're giving feedback to, their style, what they're interested in, instead of like, oh, if I did this story, this is what I would do. On the other hand, you can also just like pitch them ideas, be like, crazy idea, what if this, take it or leave it. And I find that with like feedback, like, I think people oftentimes take feedback a little too personally, and they forget that you don't have to take that feedback. You can just take whatever's helpful and leave the rest. And if none of it was helpful, you don't have to do any of it. Obviously, if it's a network executive who's like, take this feedback or your project's canceled, okay, that might be a different story. But if it's like your friend giving you feedback and you're like, I don't think they quite understood this, you can sort of decide. A piece of advice that one of our teachers gave us, James Felder, if you don't like someone's like the literal piece of feedback that they have given you and like you're bumping on their bump, basically, like just take it as whatever you were trying to say was not clear. And I found that very helpful because sometimes, you get feedback from people and you're just like, they didn't understand. Well, that's not what I was trying. So just take it as like, okay, what you were trying to do wasn't clear. Is there a more clear way to express what you were trying to express? Or is it just not for that person? So sometimes you just have to like figure out what the note under the note is.
I had a question for you, and I think you have already spoken about this, but I think I'm just going to like reword it slightly differently, which is like, besides just the practice of writing, which you've mentioned, there's a lot of other stuff that we're going to have to tackle or we might have to plan and think about and get good at. What are the skill sets besides the practice of writing that you think could really support a writer's career overall?
Pitching. I think that's the thing that we're not often taught in writing classes is how to pitch your project, how to do the elevator pitch obviously is like, oh, you are networking or whatever, you meet someone and you only have like a finite amount of time to like say your idea. So how do you say it the most succinctly and in the most interesting way? And then on top of that, like when you're actually like in the room and you have the opportunity to pitch, how you pitch and how you perform is so important. And that's something that I didn't know right off the bat. So the first feature project pitch I had ever done was a rewrite project. So there was already a screenplay and they were hiring people to rewrite this existing project. And it was for Universal. And I was like, oh my God, the stakes are so high here. I'm like meeting this executive at Universal. This is such a huge studio. This is such a like amazing opportunity. And I get into the room and they're super, super nice, but I pitched like this. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. This is the thing. And now this is happening. And now this is happening. And now this is happening. And at one point he goes, "Are we at the midpoint yet?" And I was like, "No, we are still in Act One." And he was like, "Okay, keep going." And so I feel like a skill that writers don't always have, because a lot of writers are introverts and we don't know how to necessarily do that, is like pitching is a performance. Like you have to like be so excited. You got to hype yourself up. You got to do whatever like Superman poses you need to do in advance, because it's a performance and you got to make them really, really excited about the project. They're not going to be, if you're not like, okay, so like this happens and then this happens. You gotta, yeah, you have to perform, which I hate, but I guess that's a skill from acting that probably has helped me. It's tough, man. Like that part of the job, I don't enjoy. The writing submissions, I don't enjoy. The trying to like impress someone in a general meeting is another skill that sort of comes along with pitching. I think it's sort of similar, but in a general meeting, you have to make it sound as casual as humanly possible, even though you're like, please remember me and please hire me. Like that's the vibe you want to come out of it. And you're like, how do I generate that best friend vibe when I'm like meeting this complete stranger and they have all the power? That's another part of the like work part that you just have to like, it just comes with practice, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like for the non-actors of us, the more introverted, it could be a good exercise to like observe yourself when you're telling a story that you really care about to your best friend, or like ask a close friend, how do I sound when I like tell you about something, like when I'm ranting about my day? So you get a feel for how you authentically show up when you're telling a story. And I feel like if you're able to lock into that, you're going to reach that sort of best friend vibe that you were talking about, is like, I sound
Yeah.
like myself, I sound excited, but it sounds genuine to me.
Yeah, I would say also another thing for general meetings is like once you're sort of like out there and your reps are sending you out on all of these meetings and you're just like meeting random people and it's not a specific project, it's really just to meet them so that they hopefully remember you. I have found I'm repeating certain stories. And so I've started to think a little bit more purposefully about those stories and how I tell those stories. I don't know if it's successful, but in telling that story, I'm hoping that it gives people like just a little bit of insight into who I am, where I came from. They can see me kind of like get a little shy or excited about this like silly story that I wrote when I was 10, and then like kind of like go from there. Something that in the Film Independent Lab that we did, which at first I thought was silly, every single day we had like a different like speaker come in, and every single day our program directors would say, okay, everybody, introduce yourself, say your name, the project, and a fun fact about yourself. And I was like, oh, I hate stuff like this, but what they were trying to do was trying to get us to like sort of create a list of potential stories or just like an anecdote that would make us a little bit more memorable. So that's like another kind of like, it feels very calculated, but you kind of have to like do it.
That's not a bad idea at all. And I mean, I think like writers are traditionally all the things that are kind of a little bit related to sales are the things that we're going to overthink, right? And all the things like pitching and the submissions are like what all the other people in the different industries, these are the sales stuff that we all have to like overthink and get in our heads about. So thank you for sharing some of your perspectives. One last question for me, which is about a little bit more on the kind of the future of writing industry as a whole. I mean, there's just been so much like transformation and uncertainty as far as technology, as far as just business practices. So I'm just curious from your personal perspective, what are some things that writers and creatives should be looking out for, topics or issues that they should be thinking about, things that you think we should be thoughtful and advocating for maybe a little bit?
Oh boy. So we're coming out of a strike, and it's, as you guys know, it is still tough times. Like every writer I know is out of work, basically. It's just the select few that happen to be at the sort of right level at the right time, right project. But the majority of TV writers that I know are not working right now. And it's really bad. But the thing is, like, that changes so much. Like, these executives, they move around. Like, I don't want to sound very nihilistic, but I and a lot of writers, I feel like right now are sort of going through a bit of an existential crisis when it comes to this industry and what this industry is capable of. And this is me getting on my soapbox, but like the film industry being run by tech bros is like the worst thing that could have ever happened to our industry. They are running it like tech companies, and they're not looking at creativity and what if something's a critical darling, if something is an indie movie, if something that is, you know, winning a lot of awards now, that doesn't always matter. I don't mean to be so pessimistic about it, but it is a tough time, and that's where the reality right now. I think everyone thought that coming out of the strike, like writers' rooms would come back instantly, but unfortunately during the strike, so many things got canceled that there just wasn't enough to sort of offset the demand, the need, and then also like the studios have already found about a gajillion loopholes to the stuff that we were striking about. I feel like I should end this on a more upbeat thing.
I felt like I should have asked that, but then I was like, yeah. But I think it's good to be like that's partially why we wanted to do something like a writer's workshop at the quote unquote worst possible time, because I think a lot of writers are looking for have to reinvent themselves, right? Have to figure out what the next chapter is. So it's kind of nice to be able to hear honestly a little bit of the behind the scenes and still be able to stay focused on the things that are important to us. So I don't know. Thank you for sharing your honest experiences, really, because they're your experiences.
No problem. Yeah, I would say that being writers, we do have a sort of unique advantage where we are there at the point of inception, essentially. Like we are creating the ideas. Unfortunately, actors sort of have to wait around for those roles unless they are writers themselves. But if they're just actors, they are waiting for you to write the thing that they can then be in. But you can be there right at the start, writing the thing, and hopefully you generate enough material that when the right person comes along and wants this specific thing, you have it.
Yeah, and I think too, I wouldn't say that anything that you said felt nihilistic. I would say it feels realistic. And it is good to be a realist about the situation, like the state of the industry, if working in that industry is something that you want to do, that you are doing. But like Robert said, we're also, we felt like it was a good opportunity at this moment to do a workshop on writing, because it's also a good time to reflect on your own relationship to writing. So I wonder if you were gonna sum up either your current relationship to writing or the relationship that you want to have with writing, how would you describe that for us?
Whoa. My relationship to writing. I think it's been a very interesting, it's been a very interesting journey for me. I was recently asked, if you could have a different job, when you were little, did you have something else you wanted to do? And as I said, when I was in university, I was trying everything I could to not be a writer, but there literally wasn't anything else. I couldn't think of anything else to do. And I did a philosophy and English degree. What was I thinking? Obviously, that would lead me back to writing. My parents were horrified, terrified for me. I mean, just because I've been writing for so long and I have been doing it, I've been very lucky that I've been able to do it professionally for so long that I'm getting more and more confident in my own voice and confident in my writing. I've had instances with different producers, different execs where they were telling me what to do, where I was like, okay, you know better. But now I'm like, you don't. You are the least qualified people in our industry to be making these decisions because you've never been on a set, you've never created something you don't know, and you're going by an algorithm which is telling you about the past, not the future. Sorry, that was my soapbox again. But my relationship to writing, I think, I don't know why, but like more and more, I keep thinking about Grey's Anatomy, and that someone brought up Shonda before, but how like in the show they were, I'm a surgeon, and that's who I am. And I remember like when I used to watch, I'd be like, that's so stupid. Like, that's your job. But now I find that I like write random stuff in my downtime. Like I have the urge to write. My notes app is absolutely fucking crazy. I now like journal a lot more. I didn't used to journal. So like I feel like the act of writing is something that I'm now sort of accepting that is part of me, that isn't just about my profession, that is also something that is very personal and that is a part of me.
Amazing. Yeah, we love to hear that, because I feel like if you are drawn to writing, you are a writer, and it's a very human need to want to communicate and to want to reflect. And so it's great to spend some time, nurturing that regardless of paycheck or not. So